Hello my quilting friends! My name is Leah Day, and in this video we are changing up our Evolution hoop hybrid frame. We're going from hooping to rolling rail. This changes this back rail so that the back rail can roll, and this changes our loading process ever so slightly, also our advancing process, and the size of the quilt that you can create on this frame. So let's learn how to do the switch, and then I'll explain a little bit about how all of this works at the end. So the only major thing to change from a hoop frame to a rolling rail frame is this end cap. And this is the end cap that we're using whenever we have this frame set to hooping. And it has writing on it. It says this side down. This particular end cap, you see it has that little extension. This locks it into one position so it can't roll at all. So what we want to do is unscrew the 4 screws. You're using your 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench here, and then you're going to pop on the rolling rail end cap. You can see this one doesn't have any writing. It has the 4 screw holes, and it's got this big center hole, and that's threaded, so that way we can thread on our hand wheel. So screw in that last screw, and then you put your hand wheel together. And this is very, very simple. You've got a nice big bolt that goes through there that attaches the handle. And then you've got another big bolt and washer that goes through the center. And just line this up with the end of the rail, and I give it a little twist. And then there's, let me take this back off again, and I'll show you. There's kind of a groove in the plastic in this piece. You can see that, and that's going to lock in with the plastic on the end cap. So you kind of want to get that lined up. And I also found that these pieces, there were like 3 pieces to put together with this hand wheel, and they kind of squished together the very first time that I put it on. And it might take, you know, when you're first putting it on, they're not really coming together, and then you tighten the screw and it all kind of locks together. So very, very simple build. Very, very simple assembly. And I grab my great big giant chunky Allen wrench, give that a tighten. We're ready to pop it into the frame. So here I'm just going to pop this into that ratchet assembly, close the little door, and you can see now I have a nice locking rail, but when I open the ratchet, I have a fully rolling rail too. So the very, very simple change between hooping and rolling rail. So you can see the process of changing this back rail from hooping style to rolling rail is very, very simple. It just literally unscrewing 5 screws, screwing in 5 screws, and you're done. Not a big deal. But this fundamentally changes the way that the frame works and the size of the quilt that you can quilt on it. So when you're hooping, the advantage with a hoop frame is small footprint of the frame, and you can quilt any size of quilt. So I could put a king size quilt on the frame whenever this back rail is different, when it doesn't have this hand wheel, when it is fixed and locked in this position because I'm hooping. And I want to think of that like a traditional lap hoop, where if it's clamped on all sides, it's stable and secure, you can stitch on it, you can shift it side to side, you can shift it forward and back. That's hooping style. There's no limit on the size of the quilt, there's no limit on the size of the backing, the batting, or even doing a regular shaped quilt. You could do a circular quilt and do some really unusual loads that would be very challenging to do with a rolling rail frame. So with hooping, you have flexibility because of that clamping style. The downside is it's more time consuming with every load and with every advance. So it's going to take a little bit more time on the quilting and shifting between each zone quilting section. So the upside is you can quilt any size of quilt. The downside is it's a little bit more time consuming. Now, when we have a rolling rail frame, we are limited by the size of the quilt. We can't quilt any size because the idea is that we are going to layer and base the quilt directly on the rolling rail. This means that the quilt has to be smaller than the frame is set up. The Evolution frame, the hoop frame, is set up at 66 inches long. And you absolutely cannot quilt a quilt that's 66 inches long because the quilt has to be within that. So we have limitations such as the carriage, the channel lock sticking out. These things are going to hit the sides of the frame and limit your movement of the machine side to side. Also, the needle is here in the center and you can't stitch what you can't reach, right? So as we think about the size of our frame, we have to kind of dial inward for how big our backing can be. And in this case, I've measured it and found I could do about a 57-inch wide backing, and that's really kind of at max. Okay, and then you dial in even more for where your needle actually can hit and you can actually stitch. And so what I've measured and found was 42 inches wide is the maximum width of my quilt. Now you can make it infinitely long. You could make it, 120 inches long if you wanted to, but the maximum width of the quilt top will need to be 42 inches wide. So understand that that limitation is only when you're on a rolling rail. So what is the advantage of the rolling rail? If it limits the size of your quilt so much, that seems like it kind of takes away a lot of the benefit. But with a rolling rail frame, we have a faster loading process. The whole quilt is going to layer and baste directly on the frame. And then all you do is roll it up between advances, so the advances are faster too. So if you have narrow quilts, if you have lots of baby quilts that you want to quilt, this is going to be a faster way of loading them and working on them, because every load and every advance is going to be quicker. So you have really so much flexibility when it comes to the Evolution Hoop hybrid frame. You can hoop when you're working on a big quilt and you want to be able to shift side to side and forward and back and have the ability to hoop it however you want. So that's the advantage whenever you have it set for hooping. And then whenever you're working on a small baby quilt or a long skinny quilt or whatever can fit within that 42-inch width, then you're going to switch it over to rolling rail and you're going to have a much faster loading and advancing process. So I hope that this has made sense. If you have any questions, of course, please post them in the comments below. This is something that can get a little confusing, and we have so many different frames now available from Grace Company, and each one has different advantages. The main advantage of this particular frame is it is a relatively small footprint, but it's able to do both styles of loading, either hooping or rolling rail. And I love that about it. I think that's super, super cool. So again, if you have any questions, post in the comments below. If you'd like to come and check out this frame, come and find it at leahday.com/evolve. It will literally evolve with you. This particular frame can be upgraded and expanded to an 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot Evolution Elite rolling rail frame. If you want to invest in a frame that is going to grow with you infinitely, this is definitely the ticket. But you can start, as you can see, with a home sewing machine. You could even put QCT on it. I'm so excited about doing some new videos on this, guys. I hope that you are too. So come and check it out at leahday.com/evolve. Until next time, let's go quilt.